indexing our sort of impacting on our creativity and sanity and everything else. And I suppose, the reason for the choice of this title was that because, I do genuinely believe that the next year or two, it's all going to be about confidence in our industry, certainly in running festivals. And I think, it's a kind of 360 degrees of confidence. First of all, it's about the audience, convincing them and persuading them that now is the time to start attending events again, and that they're going to be comfortable and safe. Also, it's confidence of ourselves, really, as organisers. Quite a number of us, myself included, have had that awful experience of, putting on events and having to ring up performers and audiences and venues and tell them you're cancelling. We're all going to have to take that little, gulp and deep breath to actually really, jump back in the deep end again, I think. It's also about stakeholders and partners, their confidence in us and in the events industry, that they're going to continue supporting us and, recognising the value that events are going to hold for our communities going forward. So we need their confidence. But also, interestingly, I think it's about staff and particularly volunteers. And it seems a slightly strange thing to say that they will continue to want to work with us. But I think that, these past, certainly few months, but the past year or so, has been the first time in my experience in this industry where I've actually come across people talking about staff shortages, actually difficulty in getting one or two staff in one or two areas. So I'll talk about that a bit later, but for me, that's a whole new sort of experience, really. We've normally, supply has normally exceeded demand in terms of staff and volunteers, but not at the moment. So first of all, the audience, what's happening? Well, we're seeing incredibly mixed signals at the moment, whether it's events I'm involved with or people I'm talking to and people I'm working with. We're having things like, you look at the new Bond movie, and it's already sixth in the all-time charts of box office revenues. Quite extraordinary. A few months ago, a lot of research I was seeing was saying that while people were happy to go back to outdoor events, they were reluctant to go into indoor events, particularly cinemas. And here we go, breaking box office records. But at the same time, we're still seeing some events cancelled in the UK. Now, the UK theatre industry is absolutely built on the back of pantos, these annual kind of Christmas events. We're full of screaming children and reluctant adults. And most theatres survive on the strength of their panto. And certainly there's a real hope that, because we're allowed to put them on again in the UK now, that this is the start of the post-COVID revival. But actually, it has been a bit sluggish. The biggest pantomime operator in the UK was saying that at the moment they're between 10 and 20% below kind of pre-COVID levels in terms of bookings. But they're fairly confident that they can catch up. There's still time to catch up. So, let's see. But then I suppose just looking at, my own experience. Last night, I'm actually staying down in England at the moment, my daughter, and we went to a thing called the Fat Cat Comedy Club. It's just a fairly straightforward comedy club, not big name comedians. It's in a 500-seat venue, and they had, I'm guessing, roughly 80 to 85% of the audience last night. Now that's staggering because I think, again, part of my logic recently has been, well, actually, the big must-see event, can't miss events seem to be doing well, and other events seem to be a bit sluggish. And then I go to this event last night, and as I say, a really strong audience for a Sunday night for a comedy club without any big names holding it together. And I said, it got me thinking that obviously it's the strength of that event is its bond with its community. That actually, a little bit about the demographics. It was largely kind of people in their 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s. They seem to be a group of people happy to go out. But whereas the pantos in the UK are looking at family audiences, and certainly in the UK, where there's been a lot of concern about reopening schools and discussion and debate about vaccinating people under 16, and quite a lot of parents and the family audience still seem a little bit reluctant to go back. But I was saying, last night came as a bit of a surprise to me, the fact that this, I suppose, not necessarily high-profile event was doing so incredibly well. It seemed to show to me that actually if the bond with your audience is strong enough, and maybe the demographics are in your favour, people are going to be turning out. So as I say, I have been spending a lot of time looking at future attendance. What's it going to be like? And actually, one of the most interesting ones I've found, and I've chosen for this presentation, is actually the Audience Outlook Monitor down in Ontario. It seems to be one of the better ones because they actually did chart their audience over a period of time. This one is going back to February, but I think the pattern seems fairly clear and seems to be working in our favour. And I think what's quite interesting is, first of all, quite a reasonable number of people are saying they expect to attend more events than they did before, and it certainly now seems to be outstripping those attending less. And also, hopefully the trend appears to be going in the right direction. Almost the more we're locked down, the more desperate people become to actually attend more events in the future. Now, I suppose future behaviour is always notoriously difficult to really judge, but actually, for me, this is promising, and it seems to underline certainly my own instinct and conversations I've had with people involved in the industry is that how's the old song go? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. That actually, certainly people who are passionate about the kind of events we put on, all the various lockdowns have done is accentuate that passionate sort of nature within people. So I think this is promising well for the future. But of course, we are having to address safety concerns, and the goalposts appear to be continually shifting. But again, this is quite an interesting one from Audience Outlook, because still, despite the slight politicisation of mask wearing, certainly in a country just to the south of you, but even certainly a bit in the UK and I'm guessing a bit in Canada too, that actually mask wearing still seems to be important and a concern to a lot of people. Very interestingly, in Scotland, where I live, mask wearing in many places, particularly public transport, is still compulsory, whereas in England, where I am at the moment, less so. Huge difference I notice getting out and about. And I'm not particularly concerned sort of a person or a warrior, but actually, travelling on public transport in England, it does feel a little bit more uncomfortable in Scotland. So, translate that into audiences. Mask wearing is obviously what a number of them are concerned about. So I think, a venue that I'm involved with, what they're saying to audiences is they're encouraging people to wear masks. They're suggesting they do wear masks at performances, but not insisting. But actually, if people feel uncomfortable sitting where they are, I guess, near non-mask wearers, they are encouraged to ask front of house staff, to move somewhere where they'll feel more comfortable. So again, I think addressing people's concerns in this area is going to be important. And again, distancing seems to be of concern to people still. Again, events where people are able to control their distance from others, seem to be enjoying a little bit of an advantage over those where they're not. Although, as I say, the James Bond movie, which had absolutely full houses up and down the country, seems to fly in the face of that. But this is, people are telling us these are their concerns. That's interesting. Now, what's quite interesting is some of the other figures. I know quite a lot of venues who spent a lot of money on new ventilation systems, yet actually that doesn't necessarily appear to be, people's primary concern. But again, I think certainly when we're messaging about events now, what I'm saying to and putting into practice myself is we're not just talking about how good the event is, but actually we're also having to tell audiences, how safe it is. The various measures that we're taking. And interestingly, the airlines are still doing this in a big way. I always think sometimes where they lead, it's often good to follow. So I did go to an online seminar myself, and I think they put up these 5 kind of very straightforward keys to reassuring audiences. And I think this has been quite good when I'm working with events, including my own. So first of all, based on that previous slide, will I be safe? So really having a good handle on what your audiences are thinking and feeling at the moment. Certainly what I'm doing with 1 or 2 people I'm working with is saying, let's get some regular focus groups together. Let's not second guess. Let's actually get out and ask audiences, what it is they're thinking and feeling, certainly our regular customers. And the one or two that I've been involved with have been great, actually, because, with a little bit of careful questioning, people have been very open and honest about what they think, and it's been really illuminating. So first and foremost, trying to make people feel safe in the context of wherever we're working. But also, I think we're having to think about how people get there, how they get in, how they get out, these kind of things. And in a venue that I work in Dunfermline, a simple thing that came out of one of our focus groups, they didn't mind being in the venue. What they really hated was the big crowded queue and foyer on the way in. Simply solved, open the doors half an hour earlier, and just try to make it more efficient. And people need to feel financially reassured as well. Is their money safe? So in a way, we're saying to people, in the event of cancellation, this is what happens. Absolutely. Now, the other thing as well, and again, this has come up quite a lot, is whether people can actually enjoy, events in their social groups. An event I'm involved in, someone wrote the other day and said, look, we want to bring an extra person. Can we just pull up a chair to that table, or will you insist that we stay at our own table? That kind of thing. So, we said, fine, as long as there's not 30 of you. But again, it's about reassuring people that we're going to be sensible and we're not going to be sort of overtly sort of disciplinarian in our approach. The other thing that's important, though, with all of this, and I suppose, again, I'm very conscious of this, that perhaps, organisations I'm involved with, our tone of voice has slightly changed, as we're talking to people. So in a way, it's about reassuring people that, it's still the same organisation that we were. You're still going to enjoy this event. It's still, absolutely fine to come and enjoy it. And just the last chart from this group, really, I think this is a positive one for me, because people are, and it's not just this chart. There's a big UK survey of theatres that's been showing the same, that actually people are expecting to spend more. They recognise that obviously we might have to reduce capacity. We're going to have to take further measures to get people in. We might have to charge them more, and I think this is a mix of recognition of that fact, and also I suppose a little bit of empathy. Our audiences certainly know that we've been through a hard time, and certainly a lot of fundraisers I know feel that if we're going to make an ask of our audience, now is not a bad time, because they are certainly on side. Now, what lessons really have we learned in the past kind of few months, past year and a half? I think one key one really is actually the weakness of our advocacy as an industry. I think we've been badly misunderstood and in many ways let down by government, certainly in the UK, but talking to people in Canada and elsewhere, it's a global or certainly many country issue. What's quite interesting is, in February, was it? They created this all-parliamentary group for events. So it wasn't until halfway through the pandemic that we suddenly start having a parliamentary group for events. Other industries have had these for decades. So we're absolutely way behind the curve. Not only that, but certainly there were some dreadful adverts in the UK that were kind of convincing. The picture of a ballet dancer and saying, she didn't realise that she was going to retrain as an IT professional. Which frankly, for many sort of professionals in arts and culture, was deeply upsetting and patronising. Because of course they're saying, well, look, the airline industry is never going to be the same again. We don't see these adverts for pilots. So I think it has been a failure of advocacy on our part, of our industry, that we just have not communicated well enough to government over a long period of time, and with a consistent and unified voice, the strength and importance of our industry. And so, in a way, we've been crowing a lot about not being understood, but actually part of that is because we haven't had in place the systems and steps to make ourselves understood like some other industries. I think what we have learned as well is digital and hybrid is here to stay. We've been talking about it for decades, but some of us have had to learn pretty quickly. And what's quite interesting is even working with some of the events in your region, how many of them have done kind of digital events and suddenly have people tuning in from China and the Middle East and Australia. Even quite small events have suddenly sort of been rather sort of excited by this kind of prospect. But again, I think it's also flagged up some of the sort of inefficiencies in hosting events in a hybrid or digital fashion. The fact that the attention span is shorter, that actually, even though we had certainly in the UK a huge amount of interest at the beginning of the first few lockdowns, it has undoubtedly waned. The numbers are dropping as people find other solutions for their free time. But I think what it has done is it's shown us that we are going to have to get innovative. We are going to have to get creative because hybrid is definitely part of our future, as is digital. What are the opportunities to actually create the chances for audiences to actually speak to and connect with speakers and participants online? That's going to be good. I saw something the other day where it was a bit of a theatre, some online theatre, and they had a thing called the online crush bar. And what they basically did, it was basically Zoom breakout rooms, but they sent their audience during the quick break into these breakout rooms, and if they wanted to, they could stay and chat with some of the other people. And they had some success. And quite a few people just put the mute on and turned off the camera, but actually others found it quite interesting to be able to talk online. But again, we're beginning to discover that actually this offers some new opportunities for sponsors. Whether it's just simple, bottom of the screen branding, or chance to have some messaging, or chance even for whether it's CEOs or whatever to actually speak directly to our audiences at the start of the event, whatever. We now have something new to offer sponsors. And of course, bearing in mind that a lot of the companies who sponsor us don't have anywhere near as exciting sort of online and particularly social media content as we do, it's giving us an opportunity to provide them with that something different and exciting for them to become involved in and post. Again, I'm really interested in looking at how we can actually involve audiences in performances in new and different ways. There's been this absolute explosion in things like online choirs, online art classes, online craft events, show and tell sort of events in the UK. And I don't think this is just going to go away. So how do we actually involve audiences as participants in future events and festivals? So certainly online. I think it's also showing us all that how can we create more of this content year round? It's not just for a weekend or a week. Actually, this has relevance and can create excitement for 52 weeks of the year, not just while the event's on. And the interesting thing is the way there's been quite a lot of work in, if you like, low latency technology, and some quite interesting movements out there, which is basically beginning to mean that certainly musical performances can happen without actually the performers needing to be in the same room. This is because the technology, hardware and software has accelerated, but so has the need for kind of consistent and wide bandwidth broadband. So again, we're beginning to see opportunities to put on performances without the need to travel. And again, our job is to make these convincing in terms of their production standards and a kind of plausible alternative to everyone being in the same room. So these things are happening, and we're going to have to sort of innovate and develop them over the next kind of few years, I think. So I think one of the best ways of crystal ball gazing for me is to look what's happened before. I suppose the first place to look, one which some of you may have had very direct experience of, which was SARS back in the early 2000s. I look particularly at Hong Kong and Toronto, because they are two destinations and cities really which in many ways have flourished in terms of events and festivals since SARS. And certainly in Toronto's case, people who work there tell me that actually in a sort of strange kind of way, it was SARS that actually laid a lot of the foundations for the current success. But they did take two different approaches. So Hong Kong was very much, they threw a huge amount of money at this brand new event called Harbour Fest. They created a new event, just got the big names, Rolling Stones, massive acts, put them on. The lessons they learned, well, first of all, beware corrupt officials, because there's quite a massive court case after this about money going missing. But secondly, the positive thing they learned was actually how quickly you can get large audiences back involved in events after a pandemic like this. They were getting big crowds fairly soon. And I think we're already seeing that in the UK with some major sports events. The downside was, I think what they found was trying to create something on that scale, anew, within a really short time period, really virtually impossible. Some of the audiences for some of the events were really poor. So rather than build it on solid foundations, they created something new, threw a lot of money at it, mixed results. So there was, in some ways, it was seen as being successful in helping to flag up that Hong Kong was open for business. In other ways, it kind of attracted a lot of criticism. Whereas Toronto, theirs in some ways was based much more on a partnership approach. That they created this Toronto 3 Alliance, bringing together business and culture and tourism. And certainly, the person I spoke to at length about her experience of SARS, who was working in the city at the time, she said one of the best things, it seems a strange thing to say one of the best things about the pandemic, but actually one of the best things about the situation was that they were suddenly taken seriously. That actually events and festivals were suddenly sitting at the top table with government, with tourism, with retail, because it was recognised that events was one of the ways out of the problem. If you want to run a flag up the flagpole to say you're open for business, events and festivals is one of the ways to do it. Certainly, she said, for the first time, they felt that they were part of the decision making. And so, as I say, certainly one or two people I've spoken to who were involved in Toronto during and subsequently, felt that it was a bit of a watershed moment. This that actually, the key was that, as I say, the coming together. The fact that people were up for partnerships who perhaps previously hadn't been up for partnerships. And again, I genuinely think that's something that is going to be happening over the next few months and maybe in a year or two. Suddenly people in hospitality, in retail, in travel, in government, and community situations maybe need events in a way that they didn't previously or didn't know they did previously. So again, I think it seemed to me a very good sort of indication of actually how events working in partnership with other organisations and agencies really is almost certainly the way forward for the next year or two. Now, moving on from pandemics to a place which I know quite well, which is Iceland. Love Iceland, absolutely incredible place, amazing tourist industry they've got, and they're having really incredible events. Considering Iceland is a really small country, it really absolutely punches above its weight. And again, a friend of mine who was head of Visit Reykjavik at the time, says that unfortunately it was the financial crash in 2008, where all the banks went pop and they started putting bankers in jail, that actually was the foundation of their current success. Because, actually Iceland in their wisdom realised that actually tourism was probably about the only industry they had left in a way once the banks had gone, and they continued to invest and they continued to support events. Now, what she said was, of course, they lost quite a lot of long-running, long-standing events, which is tragic to lose that that experience, those brands, that background. And that is undoubtedly happening again. Certainly happening in the UK. I'm sure it's happening, in Canada as well. That some events just will never reappear. But she said what happened was that did create some space in the market. And in retrospect, what came in its place has actually turned out to be a little bit more innovative and exciting. You've suddenly got maybe a new generation of events and organisers an end. Oh, hang on, I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to wait, so I'll go back because I think my internet I need to put some more coins in the meter.
It just paused there for a second, Paul.
Yeah. So I think some people, in some ways, they're almost forced into the event industry. Dare one say, because they had this new generation of kind of event organizer, and fortunately, they were supported and backed by the authorities in Iceland, and that again has been the foundation of their kind of current success. But we can go even further back. If we're looking at disasters, let's have a look at World War II. Because it is fascinating that so many of the, if you like, the mainstay festivals that actually, have been the main festivals in the UK from probably about 1947 through till the late 90s, have been those festivals that were created just after the Second World War. So Edinburgh, Bath, Cheltenham, Aldborough, the Edinburgh Military Tattoo, a whole range of festivals. Now, Edinburgh International Festival was set up, with the express intention of helping to reunite Europe through culture. There was this great sense that actually events and festivals as a means of healing, as a means of bringing people together, and frankly, is a means of just celebrating the end of awfulness, is a thing. And again, I absolutely can see this happening over the next year or so. Very interesting when I'm talking to musicians and actors and whatever. They have all been working on projects, all of them. They all have the next big thing, in their back pocket, in their locker. And what many have been saying is they've never really had the time to work on this before. That actually, we have this incredible pent-up sort of surge of creativity and interest coming our way. But I suppose it's up to us, the event organisers, enablers, to make these things happen. But as I say, history tells us that after experiences like natural or man-made disasters, good things tend to happen in our world. Now, I think there are some other issues which COVID has just accentuated. One absolutely is sustainability. It's been growing as an issue for events and festivals. Because at the end of the day, a lot of events and festivals are green credentials are not great. Really, we're an industry that involves a lot of people traveling vast distances to come to our events. We do use a lot of unsustainable materials. So whether it's things like Glastonbury, banning plastic bottles, we are having to become, leaders, I think, in the field of, sustainable event management. But also, when you see something like, global events industry organisers coming out with statements like they have recently at COP26, it kind of tells you that, again, we are, as an industry, a little bit behind the curve. And we are going to have to begin to justify what we do, particularly, the travel. Because at the end of the day, it's irrefutable that actually carbon emissions have dropped as international travel has dropped. And I think as event organisers, we're going to have to start answering questions around some of these issues that perhaps we, in a more aggressive line of questioning than we have previously. So we are going to have to start dealing with that. And related to that is over-tourism. We're certainly seeing this in Edinburgh, particularly at the moment, because we've sold Edinburgh the story for several decades about how important the festivals are and vital to the economy, vital to employment. And of course, we've had 1.5 summers with no festivals. And what a lot of people are saying, well, it wasn't so bad. Actually, it was rather nice. It was rather pleasant that our city wasn't being trampled over by thousands of tourists, with all these things. So I think, again, we are going to have to find convincing arguments and often solutions to perhaps potentially justifiable concerns about the impact we have on our towns and cities. We need to be ready for this because COVID has accentuated this situation. Certainly in Edinburgh, we have a thing called the Coven Society, who are a kind of heritage society, who are absolutely gunning for the festivals. They really are very, very active in the media, social media, making life very uncomfortable. So we're going to have to get used to it. I think also, if you like, security and legislation. It's likely what normally happens in situations where you have any kind of disaster at an event or involving events, legislation follows soon after. We've had this with stadiums in the UK. At the moment, we've got that the judicial review about an Ariana Grande concert where a terrorist exploded a bomb. We can pretty much guarantee now that there will be increased onus on event organisers, and this is what happens. That actually a lot of the responsibility shifts from the emergency services onto the event organisers to make our events safe, to react to events. And I feel that in the same way that, for example, in New South Wales on the right there were quite a number of drug deaths at rock festivals. So again, the authorities there started making the event organisers responsible for making the event safer and drug-free. So again, I could see some shifts in legislation which make us actually responsible for people's, to a certain extent, for people's physical health. That actually, you could see the time where if we are responsible for a super spreader event, we potentially become liable. So again, we're going to have to prepare ourselves for that. And connected to that, I think one of the big issues going forward absolutely is going to be insurance. And I know already a lot of event organisers looking at next summer, they are already beginning to swallow hard when they talk to their insurance companies about getting insurance for events. And a lot of events insurance is saying we're not covering anything COVID related. We'll cover certain things, but not that. So interestingly, that Victoria in Australia, one of the first things they've done is to provide a fund to help cover a certain amount of insurance for events. And again, I think that this is going to become widespread. If it doesn't, then I think what will happen is what happens in a lot of other industries, is that we are going to have to find a solution ourselves. Is that what we're going to have to start doing is start creating, if you like, cooperative insurance funds. So in a way, they're covering each other to a certain extent, by having all subscribing to industry-wide insurance initiatives. So really, just lastly, a few of the lessons I think that kind of come out of it and some of the challenges. Obviously our programs. The big challenge at the moment is what scale of program should I be putting on next year? How ambitious should I be? It's risk and reward, isn't it? Because we don't want our events to look a shadow of the former selves, but actually, as somebody puts on events, I don't particularly want to put myself under undue risk. Certainly next summer. I can't imagine putting on any events larger than I have before. I don't want to be significantly smaller. But actually, I think what I am going to need to do is to reduce my risk by making sure that when I look at my audience, no particular segment of my audience is going to be expected to turn out too many times during the course of my festival. So I suppose what I'm saying is that I'm beginning to look at the kind of range and scope of my audience and make sure that I'm not placing too many of my eggs in one basket. Also, obviously, going to have to look at venues. And one or two of my smaller venues will probably drop off the radar, because if there's the potential that we have a recurrence of COVID, and again we have to have 1 or 2 meter social distancing, certain of my venues just won't work. So again, it is going to affect my program. But I think also, I think the tone of the program. So one of the jobs I'm doing at the moment is running a thing called Make Music Day UK, which is a UK-wide music celebration, 21st of June. And in a way, we've already got the sort of subtext of our 22 event called, we're getting the band back together. And again, what we're talking about is trying to give people that sense that actually we represent, hopefully, some kind of new normality. Now, it's not a message we can go out with at the moment because it's too premature, but that's our intention, is to in some ways become that kind of flag bearer for the sort of post-COVID revival, because we feel that's a good piece of positioning. I think also staff volunteers, we're going to have to take a new look at this. Certainly, the events industry in the UK has been run, I'm sure you use the same expression, on the gig economy. People who are self-employed, who work for themselves, freelancers, these kind of things. They've suffered so badly. I think a friend of mine works for the UK Crowd Management Association. A lot of the management companies are struggling desperately to get stewards because they're all generally self-employed. They're struggling really desperately. Even one or two kind of technical companies, the lighting and sound, same thing. I think quite a lot of people are not interested in getting back into that, even though theatre might be what they love. They don't want to take that risk again. They're having the same issues in a lot of parts of hospitality as well. So we are perhaps going to have to take a slightly different look at how we recruit and retain staff. We might have to make stronger commitments to them. And also, we are definitely going to have to put more effort into recruiting volunteers. Certainly, I'm seeing when talking to people, maybe a lot of older volunteers are sort of taking this moment to, they've had a couple of summers without events. It's the moment to bow out. So, I think starting early, where possible, working together with lots of other events to recruit volunteers would be part of my key advice. And of course, in the marketing, we've got to be so careful in our messaging. We've got to get it absolutely right. This is a great event. It's also a safe event, but being able to get the balance between those two things right, so we don't come across as being too sort of too much like teachers and parents. And again, targeting and understanding audiences. Who are the audiences who are ready to come back? Who are those who are going to need more time? Who are those who we really can't expect back for in the foreseeable future? So there we go. There's my thoughts on where we are as an industry and what we need to do over the next year or so. So a little bit of crystal ball gazing. So hopefully there's there's a few questions that I can answer.